Hi everyone, if you're struggling not getting success, then this video is for you. Nowadays, there's one truth in life that nobody can change. Your success is in your hands. It is not in the hands of luck. The only person who has the power to decide your future is you. But the question is, do you believe in yourself? Today, we'll talk about it. My name is Muniba Mazari, and I'm a motivational speaker. If you find this video fruitful, then you can appreciate me by like and subscribe and start a new journey with me. Let's start the topic. Have you ever heard the sound of your own silence? That space where the world stops shouting and your soul starts whispering. We live in a world that glorifies noise, loud opinions, endless comparisons, and constant validation. But silence is not emptiness. Silence is strength. Silence is clarity. Silence is the language of resilience. I used to believe that my voice had to echo to matter, but life taught me something else. It was during the loneliest nights when no one was clapping, no one was watching, and I had nothing left to prove, that I discovered who I truly was. You see, silence is not weakness. It is not the absence of fight. It is the choice not to waste your energy proving your worth to those who never saw your value in the first place. And sometimes the most powerful response is no response. Not because you're afraid, but because you've grown beyond the need for noise. In silence, we learn to hear the truth that distractions bury. We start listening to our pain, our dreams, our healing. That is where transformation happens. That is where broken wings learn to fly again. I want you to know this. The world will try to provoke you, test you, even mock your stillness. But stay grounded. The loudest person in the room is rarely the wisest. And the storm may be raging outside, but peace, real peace, comes from within. If you're walking through a season of silence right now, don't fear it. Embrace it. Use it. Let it become your sanctuary, your teacher, your power. Because when your silence is intentional, it speaks volumes. And one day, when you do speak, the world will listen. Not because you shouted, but because your silence taught you what truly matters. Have you ever found yourself in a moment where the noise outside was deafening, yet inside you felt completely still? That rare and sacred stillness where time slows down and the world loses its grip on your soul is not emptiness. It is strength. And it takes unimaginable courage to sit with it. We are conditioned to equate volume with value, as though the louder we are, the more we matter. But there's something profoundly powerful about choosing silence, especially when you know you could speak. When you know you could scream, argue, defend yourself, yet you don't. Not because you are weak, but because you understand the true weight of your energy and you no longer hand it over to everything that asks for your attention. There is a quiet kind of power in restraint. A strength that doesn't need applause to feel real. When I lost the ability to walk, people expected me to be broken. They waited for me to fall apart, and for a while I did. But then I discovered something. When the external world becomes silent, when the friends disappear, when the cheers fade, when life no longer looks the way it used to, you begin to hear the sound of your own resilience. It doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It whispers in that sacred silence. You're still here, and you're still enough. Many people fear silence because they associate it with loneliness. But silence isn't the absence of presence. It is the presence of something deeper. It's the space where we meet ourselves without distractions, without masks. It's where we learn to sit with our wounds without numbing them. And yes, that's terrifying at first. But healing does not happen in chaos. Healing happens in stillness. And stillness is where true strength is forged, not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet battles no one sees. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stay silent in a world that demands your reaction. When someone misunderstands you, misjudges you, or tries to provoke you, it's tempting to respond, to defend your truth. But silence in that moment becomes your shield, not because you're afraid, but because you refuse to be dragged into chaos. You've outgrown the need to be right all the time. You've matured beyond the desire to convince people of your worth. And when you stop reacting to every opinion, you start reconnecting with your own truth. There will come a time in your life when silence speaks louder than words, when your calm presence in the face of conflict will confuse the world. And in that moment, you must remember you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be at peace with yourself. And peace doesn't scream, it doesn't demand validation. Peace is silent, and in that silence, you become uncheckable. The next time you're tempted to break your silence just to be seen or heard, pause, breathe, ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this worth disturbing the peace I've fought so hard to find? And if the answer is no, then remember this silence is not passive. It is a powerful, deliberate choice. And it is in that choice that you rise above the noise, not as someone who gave up, but as someone who finally decided to grow up. Your silence is your sanctuary. And in a world that runs on noise, anyone who can stand still, calm, composed, and connected to their inner self is not weak. They are rare. They are whole, and they are powerful beyond measure. There is a moment in every journey when you realize that your silence is no longer a sign of defeat. It's a reflection of how far you've come. And in that moment, you don't respond the way you used to. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned that not every battle is worth your voice. Growth changes your language. It changes your posture. It teaches you that protecting your peace is more important than proving your point. And that kind of wisdom only comes when you've been broken, tested, and stretched by life in ways no one else can understand. People will misread your silence. They'll think you've surrendered. They'll assume you've given up. Let them. Because the truth is, you've just outgrown the need to explain yourself. You've evolved past the stage of seeking permission to be at peace. Silence, for you, is no longer avoidance. It's alignment. And it takes unimaginable strength to walk away from conversations that once demanded your attention, to remain still when your heart wants to roar, to choose calm over chaos, even when your ego craves validation. There's a powerful shift that happens when you realize you don't have to react to every comment, every criticism, every misunderstanding. And that shift doesn't come easily. It comes after you've poured yourself out, trying to be understood and still felt invisible. It comes after you've spoken your truth only to be silenced, after you've given your heart to people who never learned how to hold it. But one day, you wake up and realize silence is not the absence of courage. It is the presence of maturity. It is the strength to no longer be driven by emotion, but guided by intention. I've learned that the loudest reaction is not always the strongest one. Sometimes the strongest response is the one you never give, and it's in those moments when you walk away from gossip, from provocation, from toxic invitations to argue, where you reclaim your power. Because the truth is, some people don't want peace. They want your energy. They want to pull you into their storm. But when you stay silent, you're saying, I've built too much peace within me to let it be disturbed by your noise. People won't always understand your silence, but that's not your burden to carry. Not everyone is meant to understand your journey, and you don't owe your healing to the ones who broke you. You've simply reached a place where your focus is no longer on proving your value, but preserving your spirit. And that is a place of deep, unshakable power. The kind of power that cannot be measured by decibels, but by discipline. When I started choosing silence, something beautiful began to happen. I started hearing myself more clearly. I began to recognize the voice inside me that had been buried beneath years of external noise, expectations, pressure, opinions. I realized that every time I chose not to react, I was actually protecting that voice, honoring it. And slowly I became more grounded, more sure, more whole. You see, silence doesn't just guard your peace, it helps you return to yourself. So, the next time someone tries to draw you into their chaos, remember that silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's the deep knowing that not everything requires your presence. Not everything deserves your energy. When you no longer need to fight every battle, when you no longer feel the urge to explain your worth, you've arrived at a higher frequency of strength. You've chosen growth over noise, purpose over pride. And in that choice, you become someone who doesn't just survive, but someone who rises, evolves, and leads by example, quietly, powerfully, and completely. There is something extraordinary that happens when you finally quiet the noise around you. You begin to hear what you were never able to hear before, not from the world, but from within yourself. And the truth is, the most important voices you need to listen to are not the ones shouting at you from the outside, but the ones whispering quietly inside. Those whispers, your intuition, your pain, your longing, your truth, have been trying to reach you for so long, but the noise of the world kept drowning them out. You were too busy surviving, pleasing, proving. You were too caught up in the chaos of expectations, opinions, and distractions to hear your own heart speak. But silence changes everything. Silence isn't just about the absence of sound. It's about the presence of awareness. It's the space where we finally confront the things we've been avoiding, the unanswered questions, the unresolved pain, the quiet dreams we placed on hold because life got too loud. But when everything else falls away, when the likes stop coming, when the noise dies down, when the room becomes still, you are left alone with the truth. And truth does not scream. Truth is subtle. It's patient. And it waits for you in silence. Many people fear silence because they don't want to face what it might reveal. But what if what it reveals is exactly what you need? What if beneath the surface of all that noise lies the very clarity you've been searching for? I've learned through pain and solitude that some answers don't arrive when you chase them. They come when you slow down enough to receive them. And silence is the doorway through which those answers enter. It's in the quiet spaces where healing begins, not the kind of healing that's loud and dramatic, but the kind that seeps in slowly, gently, and permanently. There were times in my life when the silence felt unbearable. After the accident, when the hospital walls echoed louder than any voice, I remember thinking, this silence is going to break me. But I was wrong. It didn't break me. It introduced me to myself. In that silence, I met a version of me who wasn't chasing applause or permission. A version who had questions, raw, painful questions, but who finally had the courage to listen for the answers, not outside, not from others, but from the depth of my own soul. When you strip away the noise, you also strip away the masks. You begin to realize how much of your identity was built on reaction, on responding to what others expected of you. And suddenly, in silence, you remember who you were before the world told you who to be. That kind of remembrance is not always comfortable, but it is necessary because clarity doesn't come from more noise. It comes from less. It comes from giving yourself permission to pause, to breathe, and to finally listen, not to the world, but to your soul. And the beauty is, once you learn to sit with yourself in silence, you no longer fear solitude. You no longer rush to fill every empty space with noise or distraction, because you've tasted something sacred, self-connection. You've learned that silence isn't something to escape from. It's something to lean into. Because what you find there isn't loneliness, it's truth, and truth is where freedom begins. So if you're in a season where things feel quiet, don't panic. Don't assume something is wrong. Maybe this silence isn't a punishment. Maybe it's a gift, a divine pause, an invitation to meet the most authentic version of yourself. And maybe, just maybe, the voice you've been searching for out there has been inside you all along, waiting patiently for you to stop and listen. There is a silent kind of strength that reveals itself when you refuse to be pulled into emotional chaos. It's a strength not defined by how loudly you can argue, but by how calmly you can walk away. We often think power is about control, controlling outcomes, controlling people, controlling narratives. But the real power lies in self-control, in the discipline to stay rooted when everything around you is trying to shake you, in the courage to keep your peace, even when others are losing theirs. And that level of calm doesn't come from pretending. It comes from healing, from choosing silence not as a form of withdrawal, but as a practice of wisdom. When someone offends you, provokes you, or tries to ignite your wounds, it's easy to respond with emotion. It's easy to react. But silence in that moment doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you value your energy too much to spend it on proving a point to someone who's committed to misunderstanding you. There's a kind of dignity that comes with being able to stand in your truth without shouting it. a kind of grace that flows through you when you no longer need to win every argument because you've already won your inner peace. Not everyone is ready to receive your silence with understanding. Some people will interpret it as distance, coldness, or even arrogance. Let them. You are not responsible for how others choose to perceive your boundaries. Your silence is not about them. It's about you reclaiming your power. It's about choosing not to dance to the rhythm of someone else's emotional chaos. You no longer need to be reactive because you've built something much more powerful than noise. You've built inner alignment, and people who are grounded in alignment don't chase reactions. They choose presence over performance. I remember many moments when people expected me to break, to yell, to cry out, to explain myself until I was exhausted. And in the past, I did. I tried to make everyone comfortable. I tried to smooth every conflict, fix every misunderstanding. But eventually, I realized something painful yet freeing. No matter how loud you speak, people who are committed to their version of you will never hear the truth. And so I stopped speaking, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. I started listening more. To myself, to my boundaries, to the voice inside me that said, peace is more important than being right. The world teaches us to be reactive, but growth teaches us to pause. And in that pause, in that sacred silence, we learn something powerful. Emotional control isn't about suppression, it's about intention. It's not about bottling up what we feel, but choosing when and how to express it with clarity and purpose. Because words spoken in haste often do more harm than good. And energy scattered in every direction never builds anything meaningful. So we learn to speak only when our words are more powerful than our silence. There is nothing weak about staying silent in a storm. There is nothing passive about refusing to argue with chaos. In fact, it takes more strength to walk away than it does to shout. It takes more self-respect to say nothing than to defend your worth to someone who has already made up their mind. And every time you choose silence in the face of drama, you rise. Not above people, but above patterns. Above the cycles that used to trap you in emotional exhaustion. So if you find yourself in situations where your silence feels misunderstood, remember this: you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to protect your soul, to nurture your growth, and to honor the peace you fought so hard to find. And sometimes, the most powerful way to say everything is to say nothing at all. We live in a world obsessed with constant motion. The hustle, the grind, the chase, it's all glorified. We are praised for being busy, for being loud, for showing up everywhere, for having something to say about everything. But very few will tell you this truth. Real growth happens in stillness. It happens when the world gets quiet and you are left alone with yourself. Not your titles, not your roles, not your curated image, but the raw, unfiltered version of you. And in that silence, something sacred begins to unfold. You meet the version of yourself that isn't performing, the version that is simply becoming. There is a reason why the most powerful transformations in life are not witnessed by crowds. They are witnessed in solitude. In that private, uncomfortable space where you confront your own reflection and begin to ask, who am I when no one is watching? That question doesn't require noise. It requires courage. And silence is what gives that courage room to grow. Because growth doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It whispers. It nudges. And if you're not silent enough, you'll miss it. Most people don't give themselves the permission to sit in silence because they're afraid of what they'll find there. But silence isn't the enemy. It's the mirror. It reflects what's been buried. It shows you what you've avoided. And that is exactly why it's powerful. You cannot evolve if you're not willing to examine. And you cannot examine if your life is filled with constant distraction. True growth demands that you stop escaping and start embracing the quiet. It's in the quiet that you hear the stories you've been telling yourself, stories of limitation, of fear, of worthlessness. And it's in the silence that you finally begin to rewrite them. Some of the greatest decisions I've ever made came during seasons of silence. Not in the noise of applause, not in the chaos of opinion, but in the stillness of personal alignment. That's where clarity lives. And clarity is a gift that silence gives you when you're patient enough to wait. So many people rush into decisions, relationships, and careers without ever stopping to ask, is this truly I aligned with who I'm becoming? But the answers to those questions aren't found in external validation. They're found in the quiet moments when you stop performing for the world and start listening to your own soul. There is something so profoundly beautiful about realizing that your evolution doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be seen. It just needs to be real. When you grow in silence, you begin to move differently. You speak less, but when you do, your words carry weight. You engage less, but your presence becomes more impactful. You stop chasing the need to be understood and start nurturing the need to be authentic. And that is where true power lies, in the unshakable alignment between who you are and who you're becoming. People might not notice your silent growth at first. They might wonder where you've gone, why you've changed, why you've become quieter. Let them wonder. You are not here to entertain the expectations of others. You are here to honor your becoming. And becoming requires space that only silence can offer. You're not disappearing. You're refining. You're not withdrawing. You're awakening. There is a version of you that silence is shaping, strengthening, and preparing. And when it's time, that version will emerge, not with noise, but with quiet confidence, with still strength. So if you find yourself in a silent season, don't fight it. Don't rush to fill it with noise. Trust it. Lean into it. Let it do its sacred work, because the quietest seasons often produce the loudest breakthroughs, and the version of you that is born in silence will speak volumes without ever raising its voice. There is a kind of clarity that only silence can offer. A clarity that doesn't come through explanation, but through observation. You start to see who people truly are when you stop speaking, when you stop overgiving, over-explaining, and overextending yourself. In silence, masks fall off. True intentions reveal themselves. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to ask questions anymore. The answers come on their own. When you're no longer filling every space with words, the behavior of others speaks for itself. And that behavior, that's what teaches you what words never could. So often, we're caught in the trap of trying to make people see us, understand us, value us. We think that if we just say it the right way, if we just try a little harder, they'll get it. But silence teaches you that respect, love, and loyalty are not things you should have to convince someone to give you. When you go quiet, you begin to observe who checks on you when you're not speaking, who misses your presence when it's not loud, who values your soul even in your stillness. And that is a lesson no amount of words could ever teach you. I remember moments when my silence felt like a test. Not for me, but for the people around me. Would they reach out without being prompted? Would they still see me when I wasn't performing, giving, or pouring into them? And very often, the answer was no. But that no became my freedom, because silence isn't just about detaching from the noise. It's about learning who belongs in your peace and who only thrives in your chaos. It's about realizing that those who are meant to walk with you will hear your silence just as loudly as your voice. When you stop filling in the gaps, people have no choice but to reveal themselves. The ones who only came to take will disappear when they can no longer consume your energy. The ones who stayed for convenience will leave when they're no longer entertained. And that's exactly what silence is supposed to do. It cleanses your space. It separates the temporary from the permanent, and it allows you to walk forward with people who honor not just your presence, but your quiet, your space, your boundaries. Silence also teaches you something sacred about energy, that not every situation deserves your reaction, and not every person is entitled to your response. Sometimes the most powerful way to protect your peace is to say nothing. Not out of indifference, but out of deep awareness. You begin to understand that silence is not a lack of communication, it's a statement, a boundary, a declaration that your energy is sacred and not everything or everyone is worthy of it. And then something even more beautiful happens. In that silence, you begin to attract a different kind of connection. People who understand your silences. People who don't need constant noise to feel close to you. People who value depth over volume. And these people, they're rare, but silence creates space for them to enter your life. Because when you're no longer entertaining the loud and the shallow, you make room for the soft, the real, and the soulfully present. There's wisdom in observing how people treat you when you are no longer a source of noise in their lives. When you're no longer explaining yourself. When you're no longer trying. Do they still see you? Do they still choose you? Because that is where truth lives, not in the words, but in the silence between them. And once you've learned to observe, to discern, to listen without responding, you'll never beg for energy that doesn't recognize your worth. You'll simply let it go quietly, peacefully, and powerfully. Because in the end, silence doesn't just teach you about others, it teaches you about yourself, about your value, your boundaries, your strength. And once you've learned to sit in your own quiet truth, no amount of noise can pull you back into a world where you are not seen, not heard, not honored. You will have become your own sanctuary, And that, my friend, is the loudest freedom of all.